250 Americans, one building, 14 floors, the post office, the grocery store, the police station, the church, the school, all inside. The town's mayor sleeps 3 floors above the only doctor. The only doctor sleeps 2 floors above the only jail. The kids ride the elevator to class. And every night at 10:30, the single road that connects this town to the rest of the United States shuts down, the tunnel closes, the lights cut out, and the entire population is sealed inside one structure until morning. You're going to be told this is a charming experiment in community, a quirky little town, a wholesome story about people who chose to live under one roof. That's the lie. Whittier wasn't designed. Whittier was abandoned, and the people who live there today are not the architects of an experiment. They are the inheritors of one. What you're about to see isn't a town. It's the leftovers of something the United States military built and walked away from. And every detail of how these people live, every rule they follow, every door they open, was decided 80 years ago by men who never intended for civilians to be there at all. The first thing wrong with the story is the building itself. The structure that holds the town is called Begich Towers. 14 stories, 196 apartments, 3 connected towers of poured concrete sitting on a strip of land between a glacier and the sea. Most people assume it was built as housing. It wasn't. It was built as a barracks. The original name was the Hodge Building, completed in 1957, designed to house United States Army personnel during the Cold War. The Army left in the early 1960s. The building stayed. The people who remained, the families who had come north for military work, and the workers from the railroad had nowhere else to go, so they bought what the military left behind. In 1973, the residents of Whittier voted to purchase the entire abandoned base, including the tower. That is the first inversion. They didn't choose to live together. They were left behind. The togetherness is not philosophy. It is geography that no one ever wanted in the first place. To understand why anyone is still there, you have to understand what surrounds the building. Whittier sits at the head of Passage Canal, a narrow fjord cut into the Chugach Mountains on the western edge of Prince William Sound. The town is wedged into a strip of flat ground less than a mile across. Behind it, 3,500-foot peaks rise straight up. In front of it, the sea. There is no other land. There is no place to spread out. Above the town, almost constantly, sits a ceiling of low cloud. The mountains catch the moisture rolling in off the Gulf of Alaska and crush it down. The result is a microclimate that the United States military once described as ideal for hiding things. According to state records, the average annual precipitation in Whittier is 196 inches. That is more than 16 feet of rain in a normal year. The average annual snowfall is 241 inches, 20 feet. In a heavy winter, the snow stacks against the side of the building higher than a one-story house, and the wind off the canal hits the concrete at speeds of more than 60 miles per hour. For 6 months of the year, going outside is not a casual decision. People who have lived in Whittier for decades describe winters where the windows of the tower shake at 3 in the morning, where horizontal snow finds every gap in every door frame, where a walk to the harbor that takes 90 seconds in summer can disorient an experienced local in winter. Inside the building, none of that touches you. The grocery store is on the first floor. The post office is in the lobby. The clinic, the laundromat, the police office, the city hall, the conference room, the indoor playground, the church. All of it inside concrete walls, heated corridors, a pedestrian tunnel running underground from the tower to the school so the children can walk to class without ever seeing the sky. Subscribe to Impossible Lands. The most important question about this place is not how the building works. It's who decided that this is where Americans would live. And the answer is going to change how you see every detail of the story. The real architect of Whittier was not a city planner. It was the United States Army Corps of Engineers. And the date that mattered was not 1957, it was 1941. That year, the commanding general of Alaska's defense, a man named Simon Bolivar Buckner Jr., was looking for a hidden place. The Japanese had just begun moving across the Pacific. American military planners assumed Alaska would be next, and they were not entirely wrong. Within a year, Japanese forces would land on 2 American islands in the Aleutians. Buckner wanted a port that the enemy could not see, could not bomb easily, and could not freeze. He found Whittier. The site checked 3 boxes. The water was deep and ice-free year-round. The mountains around it blocked radar. and the ceiling of cloud that sits over the canal for most of the year made aerial reconnaissance almost impossible. From above, the place did not really exist. The army built two things there, a port and a tunnel. The tunnel is the second thing most people get wrong about Whittier. They assume it was always for cars. It wasn't. The Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel, 2.5 miles long, bored straight through Maynard Mountain, was completed in 1943 as a railroad tunnel only. It carried supplies, troops, fuel, ammunition. It was a military artery, not a public road. For more than 50 years, the only way to drive to Whittier was to put your car on a train and let the railroad pull you through. There was no other route. The mountains made it impossible. The sea froze the alternatives. Then, in 2000, the tunnel was converted. The tracks were lowered flush into a concrete roadbed. Cars could finally drive through, but the tunnel was still only 1 lane wide. So an entire system had to be built around it. Cars heading toward Whittier go in on the half hour. Cars leaving go on the hour. Trains take priority over both, and every night the tunnel closes. 10:30 in the evening. The traffic lights go red. The gates come down. The jet engines that ventilate the tunnel shut off. And until 5:30 the next morning, there is no way in or out of Whittier by land. The town is sealed. This is the part that the cheerful tourism articles tend to skip. If you have a medical emergency at midnight in Whittier and the weather is too rough for a helicopter, you are inside the building. There is no driving out. The mountain is closed. Now consider what this means in combination with the climate. For roughly half the year, the weather makes the outside hostile. For every night of the year, the only road is closed. You are not in a small town with limited options. You are in a sealed container. The building is not a quirky address. It is the entire viable surface area of your daily life. This is the second inversion. The people of Whittier did not choose intimate community. They were placed inside a structure where every other option was eliminated. The closeness is not lifestyle. It is the residue of a military design problem that the army solved by building a town nobody could leave. And that's not even the strangest part, because there are not one but two of these buildings in Whittier, and the second one tells the truth about the first. Walk out the front entrance of Begich Towers, turn left, and look up the slope. Sitting maybe 400 yards away on a small rise of bedrock is a second concrete monolith, 6 stories, 500 feet long, 275,000 square feet, the same scale as the building where the town lives, cast in the same kind of reinforced concrete by the same Army Corps of Engineers. It is called the Buckner Building, and nobody has lived in it since 1966. The Buckner Building was finished in 1953, at the height of the Cold War. It was actually the original, quote, city under one roof, before the tower existed, before Whittier was even a city. The army designed it to house 1,000 soldiers and let them survive a nuclear strike. Inside, there was a mess hall, a movie theater with 320 seats, a 4-lane bowling alley, a 6-cell jail, a bakery, a barbershop, a radio station, a dental clinic, a small hospital, a rifle range, a library, and tunnels connecting it to other parts of the base. Soldiers were not supposed to need to go outside. The building was the world. Then, in 1964, on Good Friday, an earthquake hit Alaska. The magnitude was 9.2. According to the United States Geological Survey, it remains the second largest earthquake ever recorded in human history. The shaking lasted around 4.5 minutes. Tsunamis followed. In Whittier, 13 people lost their lives. The port was destroyed. Buildings across the town collapsed. The Buckner Building did not. It sits on solid bedrock. Its frame is reinforced concrete on slate and greywacke. Inspections after the earthquake confirmed it was structurally sound. The army could have stayed. They left anyway. By 1966, the military had decided that maintaining a fortress in a remote Alaskan port no longer made financial sense. They tried to sell it. Nobody wanted it. They tried to lease it. Nobody wanted it. So they walked away. And that is where the story becomes something almost no documentary covers, honestly, because the Buckner Building is not just abandoned, it is unremovable. The interior is saturated with asbestos. Hazardous building material surveys conducted by the state of Alaska identified 29 separate asbestos-containing materials inside, 9 lead-containing materials, petroleum constituents in the surrounding soil above cleanup levels. The structure cannot be safely entered. it also cannot be safely torn down. According to the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, the estimated cost to demolish or remediate the building runs between $20 and $25 million. And the only land route for hauling debris out is the same single-lane tunnel that trains and cars share. To remove the asbestos, you would have to release dust into the air of a town where every resident sleeps in a single building 400 yards downwind. So it stays empty, roofless in places. Inside, almost every ground floor room has half an inch of standing water. Stalactites of concrete have formed in the cracks where rain has been leaching through for 60 years. Vegetation has crept in through broken windows. Animals nest in the wires hanging from collapsed ceilings. On one wall, somebody painted the word "Red Drum." The building cannot rot fast enough, and it cannot be cleared. This is the third inversion, and the hardest one. There are two identical Cold War buildings in Whittier. One holds a town, the other holds nothing. And the residents of the first wake up every day and look out their kitchen windows at the second, at the empty version of themselves, at what their own building would become if the same decision had been made about it. The town under one roof is haunted by the town that wasn't. And it cannot be removed, not in any reasonable human timescale. The Buckner building will outlive everyone now living in Whittier. Now consider one more detail: the name. The building where the town lives, the tower, was not always called Begich. It was the Hodge building until 1972. That year, an Alaskan congressman named Nick Begich boarded a small twin-engine plane in Anchorage. With him was Hale Boggs, the majority leader of the United States House of Representatives, Begich's aide, and the pilot. The plane was flying south. It never arrived. The largest air and sea search in Alaskan history at that time covered around 325,000 square miles. Nothing was found. No wreckage, no bodies. The four men were officially declared dead. Begich and Boggs are still listed as missing more than half a century later. The following year, the residents of Whittier renamed their building after Begich, to honor him, to remember. And so the town under one roof bears the name of a man whose body the wilderness around it absorbed and never returned. The building where 250 Americans live, sleep, work, and raise children carries the name of an absence, a man who flew over this exact terrain and was erased by it. The people of Whittier did not invent any of this. They inherited it. The land was chosen by the military. The building was built by the military. The tunnel was bored by the military. The name was given for a politician the wilderness took. Every structure of their daily life was decided by people who are no longer there, for purposes that no longer exist. What remains is a town that functions. 300 residents, give or take, depending on the season. A school of around 50 students between the ages of 3 and 18. A grocery store called the Cozy Corner, with shelves stocked once a week. A mayor named Dave Dickerson, whose family has lived in the tower for years, whose daughter posts videos of life inside the building to millions of viewers who cannot believe what they are seeing. Commercial fishing in the harbor, cruise ships in the summer, a ferry, a church service on Sunday in a small room on one of the lower floors. In a quieter way, it works. People know each other. People take care of each other. When children get sick, neighbors deliver groceries to their door inside the same hallway. When somebody dies in the building, the funeral happens in the same building. When the weather makes the canal unsafe and the tunnel is closed and the helicopters cannot fly, the town does what it was designed to do. It survives by being one organism inside one shell. But it was not designed for them. That is what every cheerful article about Whittier leaves out. The mythology of the place wants it to be a story about choice. Americans who decided to live differently. A community of people who rejected sprawl and chose density. A small experiment in what humans can do when they share walls. It is none of those things. The people of Whittier did not choose density. The mountains and the sea and the army made the decision for them. The choice they made was to stay after everything that gave the place its original purpose disappeared. That is a different decision. It is a smaller one, and a harder one, and a much more honest one. What is left is not a model, it is a remainder. And here is the last detail, the thing the tourism boards never quite say out loud. Whittier was chosen, originally, because it could not be seen. The clouds, the mountains, the fog off Prince William Sound. From the air, the town effectively vanishes. That was the entire point. The United States Army wanted a port that the enemy could not find. The defense became the geography. The geography became the prison of options. The clouds that hid the town from bombers are the same clouds that today keep the residents inside the building. The thing that was supposed to protect them from being seen is the thing that makes leaving impossible. A town is not always something people build. Sometimes it is something people inherit. And sometimes the structure they inherit is more honest about what humans actually need than the structure they would have built for themselves. Every night at 10:30, the gates come down at the mouth of the tunnel. The red lights blink twice. The fans cut out. And inside 14 floors of poured Cold War concrete, 250 Americans go to sleep in the same building. Above them, the cloud. Below them, the sea. Beside them, on the slope, the other building. The one that nobody lives in, the one that nobody can remove, the one that remembers what this town was supposed to be. They are not pioneers. They are not utopians. They are the last residents of an experiment the United States military forgot to take with it. And here is the question that should haunt you. If every other town in America vanished tomorrow, and only Whittier remained, would future archaeologists understand what they were looking at? Would they see 250 people in one building and assume it was a refuge, a prison, a monument, a mistake? Or would they finally see what we still refuse to see about ourselves? That the difference between a community and a containment is sometimes just the door you happen to be born behind. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you on Impossible Lands.